Yeah, I know. I did. My wife
I did too this time.
I've never done it.
we had to wait 2 hours. Two and a half.
It was 40 minutes. I was in and out.
An hour and 10 minutes.
Courthouse. Simon was over there. It took him just over an hour.
We got in and out real quick.
That was David's too.
He said it's all statutory how we would restructure this. He said, wait to see if it actually happens.
That's best. I got it.
You spent time down in Southern
At least you can get back. Okay, you made it back in one piece, that's all that matters. Safe and sound, and now you're in your own bed. It's so pretty down there. My mom's cousin has a lake house over there, and it's nice. It's not bad. Everybody wants to go to Florida, and I'm like,
All right, we'll bring the Area Planning Commission November 4th meeting to order. If you would please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank everyone for coming. Roll call, Katie.
Hoplo,
Yes.
Otto,
Yes.
Higgs, McWhirter.
Hicks is here too. Yeah. Yes, okay.
I saw
I
him.
didn't hear you say anything, right? Wow.
Nevers.
Here.
Pearson.
Here.
Poland. Here. Richmond. Present. Schultz.
Here.
Todd.
Here.
Atkins.
Yes.
Courtney.
Josh Courtney.
Why are you not on my list?
You
Sorry.
get to go home.
Okay, Courtney.
You gonna say here?
I'm sorry, I thought you were on this one.
Okay, moving to item number 3, approval of the minutes. Now, it was brought to my attention by Mr. Soltz that we actually did address this in our October meeting, and I went back to review that, and there were a couple words that needed to be changed, and that would have been on page 2 of 6.3 and 6.4. I brought that to Katie's attention this afternoon, so she has before you a new copy with those changes made. So I guess my question is, what we're doing here is we're kind of catching up on a backlog of some shortages in our staffing of the APC. We're trying to get caught up with some things. So do we want to do these individually, or do you want to do them as a group? I'm open to suggestions.
I'm okay with the group. I mean, it's okay with me.
Do them as a group? Anybody opposed to doing them as a group?
Anybody has something special to point out, we can always hear that once the motion's made.
Okay. So let's talk about them individually and then we'll approve them as a whole. Is everyone okay with the changes that were made on June 10th? And you do have that new copy with the changes made with you. Okay, is this a July 29th updated one too?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Any discussion on the June 10th minutes? Okay, hearing none, we will move to item 3.2, the June 10th executive session minutes. Those are pretty brief. Any concerns about those? Any corrections? Hearing none, we will move to 3.3, July 11th, 2024. Everybody's name smelled right? Okay, hearing no discussion related to July 11th, 2024. We will move to July 11th, executive session, 2024. Pretty brief. Okay, moving to July 29th, and those were not in the packet, they were added on, right, or were they in the packet?
They're in the packet, but there was a correction that had to be made.
Okay, can you share that correction with us?
I believe, not to call anybody out, but I think Word spelled Todd Glancy's name wrong.
Okay,
They've changed his name to Glance, so I have to search it.
okay. So if everyone wants to review those and see if there's any other changes that we need to make.
So the resolution to amend the solar ordinance, was that when we basically, I didn't recall it was an amendment to the solar ordinance. I thought it was just us saying we were going to wait 6 months until we got applications. But that was to amend the solar ordinance? Or maybe I'm not remembering everything that was in that.
We did a resolution to amend the solar ordinance that came out of the area-wide zoning ordinance. The language of that, is that what you're referencing? Prior to that, we were working on an application.
Yeah.
And my personal feeling about that is I think once we get the ordinance where we want it, then the application should spin off of that because they should tie themselves together. So that's why the application is kind of on hold right now until we can get the ordinance amendments. Any discussion about that?
Yep. I just want to point out, we do have a resolution for that night that we did approve. Now, I haven't seen the signed copy. I don't know if you signed a
I did.
signature page. Okay, we did have a resolution that we approved that night.
Yeah, I recall passing something, I just didn't remember that it was to amend the solar ordinance, but yeah, I take your word for
Well,
it.
it's actually authorizing the suspension of filing solar applications.
Yeah, that, just the name to amend the solar ordinance
So I
surprised
have
me.
that title maybe, like, the resolution was authorizing the suspension of filing a solar application.
So do I just need to go back and change the wording?
David's saying no. David, would you like to share with us?
Yeah, just to refresh everyone's recollection, I believe the resolution was to amend the solar ordinance with recommendations on specific parts of the solar ordinance that needed further examination. The board is doing public hearings on those, and then those recommendations will be taken back to the commissioners. It wasn't just about the application. It was about specific areas that needed further research before applications could be taken so that the commissioners could then take those recommendations and do with them what they need to be. So I think it's actually properly titled.
So the applications are on hold while we go into the potential amendment process.
And that's all spelled out in the resolution, which comes from the area-wide zoning ordinance.
And the discussions that we've been having are, I want to clear that up, are not public hearings, they're public discussions. Okay? Okay.
Perhaps it would be a good idea if we were to attach the resolution to the minutes. Include that as a part of, make sure that it's recorded, that we have it, that we have.
And it must be a little different as far as the extent of what it covers than what the papers in our packet from that night is too. This is the paper from our packet that night.
Just thinking we ought to have some kind of a record. You know, we are addressing this, but where is the resolution? So that should be available.
This is all tied to the
Somehow.
July 29th meeting, correct? And the July 29th minutes is what we're referencing.
Right.
So we will want to put a copy of the resolution included with the July 29th minutes.
Right.
Okay? Any other discussion related to the July 29th minutes? Okay, hearing none, I'm ready for a motion to approve the minutes of June 10th, June 10th executive session, July 11th executive session, and the July 29th APC meetings.
I would so move with the amendments that we have made,
Okay? Okay,
adopted.
so Mr. Bothwell makes a motion to add the amendments we've discussed to the packet of minutes. Second from
I'll second. You already had a second?
Mrs. Poland, okay. Second from Mrs. Poland. Katie, roll call vote.
Bothwell,
Yes.
Caudill,
Yes.
Courtney,
Abstain.
Hicks,
Yes.
McWhirter,
Yes.
Nevers,
Yes.
Pearson,
Yes.
Poland,
Yes.
Richmond,
Yes.
Schultz,
Yes.
Todd.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries. Get the minutes out of the way. Okay, moving on to item 4, approval of a new administrative assistant. Mr. Strauss, would you like to make some
After
comments?
doing the interviews, and with your permission, the board's permission, I would like to promote Katie to the administrative assistant's job.
Okay. Any questions or discussion, commission members, in regard to that? Mr. Bothwell?
Do we have, excuse me, a vacancy? Have we acted on making this a vacancy? Has Brenda submitted her?
Brenda's been retired for some time now.
I didn't know. Have we taken action on that?
The commission, from what I understand, did not have to take action on a retirement.
But is
There
that a
is a
matter of
vacancy.
record that we have that she has? What we've done sometimes in the past has been difficult. For example, Mr. Malat, when he was a substitute for his dad never submitted a resignation, and we hired Ryan to take his job, to take his dad's job, and there was never any action taken. There was never a letter submitted.
Brenda submitted a letter
So
of
she had-
retirement to HR.
That's what I wanted. It is recorded there, so
Yes,
we
sir.
do have a true vacancy.
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's great.
Jim and I were very careful, Bob, that we made sure we followed the recommendations of the personnel person, Justin Sadoff, in this process.
Okay.
So, yeah, we followed his lead and on it.
All right, I just want to make sure that we're not ending up on record with two people in the same position, whatever.
I think Katie can tell you she's been doing it for a few weeks now.
She's been doing it for a few months now, so.
I just want to be clear where we are in the process. I know we discussed that you'd have the office people to have the internal, and then at some point Randy brought in. So I get the impression that you or other APC members have been part of this discussion, or is there like a second interview, or whether, I just didn't know. There was a debate about that last time, so.
I think Jim requested that he and Randy Berryhill be the interviewing committee for the position. Yeah, and I think I asked the commission how we felt about that and if we wanted to be part of that. And I don't think that we had any response when we put that on the table.
Okay.
You remember that?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
As a result of the action that we are about to take then, we will have a vacancy for the position that she currently holds.
Yes, as code
We have a
enforcement
process
officer.
in place. Are we ready to take applications for that?
Jim?
That job, I was gonna cover that in my director's report,
Okay, great. Okay.
if that's okay, sir.
Sure.
I want to say Katie's done a wonderful job. I don't know. She's been holding it together. We've had a lot of transition in the APC office, and the young lady has earned every dime she's made. In fact, I would, when the motion's made, I'd like for that motion to include the fact that the pay be retroactive back to the time in which Brenda left, which I believe her last date was the 11th of October, and Katie would have started the capacity on October 14th, which would have been the following Monday. So I'm going to ask that when the motion's made that we approve this, that we make it retroactive to give her the compensation that she's truly earned.
I think that probably is well and proper and a good idea. I do have one last question about that. The salary that we were paying Brenda as of the last 2 years, it included an increment of $2,000 because of lifetime service, more or less. Is that $2,000?
I asked that question, Bob, and the job was posted with that $2,000 removed.
Removed, okay. All right, I think that's proper. I would not have a problem with the job that Katie's doing. If someone would like to ask for that in our budget at the next meeting or whatever, she may not be getting enough for the job that she has done and is continuing to do, but it can't be under the guise, I don't think, of a lifetime increments. Right. So I'd be open to considering.
I know the council's been, is considering, increases for all county staff. And I think that's a great, I want to credit the council for that. I don't know it's official yet, but yeah.
Yeah, I'll move to approve Ms. Cable for administrative assistant and back pay to the date Brenda Harrison left.
Motion by Mr. Schultz,
Second.
second by Mrs. Poland. She's beating you, Bob.
Okay, that's good.
I'm fast.
That's great.
I don't know how I
I don't
don't
hear.
sleep.
Okay, roll call vote, please.
Bothwell,
Yes.
Cabo,
Yes.
Courtney,
Yes.
Hicks,
Yes.
McWhirter,
Yes.
Nevers,
Yes.
Paul Pearson,
Yes.
Poland,
Yes.
Richmond,
Yes.
Schultz,
Yes.
Todd.
Yes.
All right, congratulations, Katie.
Thank you.
Thank you for the work you've done
Definitely,
for
yes.
us.
We're definitely appreciative.
Moving on to item 5, reports, resolutions, communications, and general discussion. Mr. Glickfield?
I have nothing this month. We have not had any court this month.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Strauss?
So the code enforcement officer position will be posted Wednesday, November 6th. With the actions that we've taken tonight, Katie's current position is now vacant, so we will have to take plans to start that process. The inspections we did in September and October, we did 159 in September and we did 206 in October. The permits that we issued in October and September were both set at 62. This is normally the time of year where permits start to slow down. As it starts to get a little bit cold, people don't want to be out digging post holes and things of that nature. Construction cost for September was $3,365,278, with permit fees brought in at only $4,073. October construction cost was $2,532,000, or $2,532,143, while permit fees brought in for that period was only $3,895. I would like to start the process of increasing permit fees. I don't think they've been increased in quite some time now. And it's funny because someone can build a $1 million house and only pay $125. But if they want to put up a accessory structure, that could go as high as $250. So our fees are a little bit out of date. We're also having an issue with people calling for permits or calling for inspections when they're not ready for inspections, which wastes time and fuel and things of that nature. We also have some folks with non-compliance issues. So I would also like to start looking at possibly fining people for code violations, for calling for inspections when they're not ready for inspections, and for building without a permit. There are things that this agency could be doing that we're not. I don't want to be a heavy-handed type of a director, but I need contractors to understand that if they're going to do business in Grant County, they need to do it above board. They need to apply for permits. If they're doing plumbing if they're doing plumbing, they need to be state certified for that. They need to be state licensed. So there's a lot of things that we need to start addressing. I mean, I'm now 4 months into my job, and you know, there are just some things that I'm looking at to try to improve services at our office. The last thing I would like to talk about is I believe we are ready for the public meeting for the floodplain ordinance. Everybody that I've sent the floodplain ordinance out to has not had any objections to it. So I think that's the next step. And then we have to take it around to all the communities that we serve. And then once that's all done, then it goes to the commissioners. So I hope we could do the floodplain ordinance public meeting at the December meeting.
Okay.
I'd like to get that on the schedule if that's all possible.
Okay. So we'll get that posted and advertised correctly and, okay. Commission members, any questions or comments in regard to Jim's report?
I've got two things. I agree with fees and fines. We need to start assessing them. And what I found, well, another one I'd add to your list, which maybe it's in your mind, I'm sure it wasn't exhaustive, but we give people 2 years to finish a project. And then, especially if we haven't heard from them, if they don't file an extension, they don't call for final inspection, we need to start finding people for that. So we don't have people, projects that are 3, 4, 5 years out that we're having to follow up on.
So, and again, Clayton, you're absolutely right, because I've been thinking about that. I get inundated with emails, it's been 180 days and we've not heard from you. My problem that I'm running into and talking with Randy, my inspector, if we go out and we do a final, but they've missed 3 or 4 inspections that's supposed to have been done, I do not feel comfortable, nor do I think, I don't want to put the county in legal liability issue of giving a certificate of occupancy when there have been inspections that have been blatantly missed. Because if something happens down the road and they come back on us, well, you said everything was okay. For everybody's information, an inspection is only a snapshot of what you see on that particular day, that particular house. You could walk out of that building and let's say we're doing a plumbing inspection. You could walk out of that building and they could change that plumbing and cover it up because we've already told them it's okay. And we would never know that. So if we miss inspections, if we miss a rough-in, or if we miss a call before cover inspection, or if we miss, there's a variety of inspections that we do on a new property. If we missed half of the required inspections, I don't feel comfortable, and Dave, help me out here for a second. Legally, I don't think we can give them a certificate of occupancy if they've missed half the inspections, because it's just putting the liability on us.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I don't have any, I'm not saying that should be the only fine. I'm just saying it'll apply more to people that didn't end up doing their project. But what I'm thinking that we've sent you notices, your time is now up. We haven't done a final, it's not done. You've wasted our time for 2 years.
Right. There will be, once we get everything down on paper, and we will bring it to all of you to review. I don't want to be the only person in this county that decides who gets fined and why. I think that needs to be your decision. I'm just at that point in time going to be your advisor.
Yeah. Thank you. My other question, I'm sorry, I didn't expect this to take so long, but the code enforcement position, would you, I don't necessarily know all the positions in the office, would you consider that like an entry-level position, someone, or is this like you're expecting someone to already have licenses and maybe some experience?
In previous areas that I've worked, the code enforcement officer's position may be a entry-level position. It's also one where I belong to a couple of different organizations, and one of the organizations I belong to is a code enforcement officer safety program. I would like whoever takes that position to take that class because it teaches you about personal awareness and safety around you while you're working. People aren't happy when you're trying to tell them that you may have to tear down their house, and you have to understand body language, and if somebody's ramping the conversation up too much, you want to be able to de-escalate and remove yourself from that situation. I don't want to be the person that has to call someone's spouse and tell them something happened.
Right. But that'd be probably like on the job. We're not necessarily looking for someone with 5 or 10 years experience, maybe.
No, we're not. But I mean, code enforcement is something that we can teach. But there are classes out there that person can take.
Are there certifications, Jim, to go with that?
There are, through certain programs that I currently deal with. The one that I'm thinking of is a $275 fee, but it's a 15-hour class, and it's in 5 modules at 3 hours apiece. That can be done over the internet. So, You know, we don't have to pay for them to travel anywhere.
Are there certifications that you would like to see your staff acquire in order for them to be better knowledgeable of the job that they're doing? Or are there in-services or training that, I mean, I would, if you foresee that and we could target that or plan that into next year, I think that'd be wonderful.
One thing that I'm going to, and I probably should have brought this up, but one thing I'm going to ask of the commission is that at the end of the year, we fold whatever training money that we have for 2024 that we haven't spent and travel for training classes that we haven't spent. I'd like to fold that over to 2025 because we will have expenses next year.
Can we do that?
When December 31st ends, that money, that appropriation ends. You can go for an additional appropriation in 25, but you just can't move the money forward from one year to the next without an appropriation encumbrance of some kind.
Well,
An obligation.
Right. We were talking about trying to get an encumbrance from the commission. The commission.
To get an encumbrance, you have to have some kind of a contract, a purchase order, something that's obligated to money to that point. You just don't encumber it over. You have to have something that.
So here's my issue, Jim. I'm sending Randy to 3 classes by the end of the year. We may not get invoiced for those classes
That could be legitimate, yeah.
the first of the year.
If you've incurred a debt and haven't paid it yet, that would open the grounds for possibly encumbering to the next year then.
Okay.
Jim, if Jim Strauss would like to see some training for the staff and our appropriation for next year isn't sufficient, we could go back to the council and request additional appropriation?
Right, there are 2 ways of looking at it. If you have some money excess in another account, you can have it transferred between accounts.
Okay.
But if you need more, that'd be an additional appropriation that you'd have to have council approval.
Okay. Josh, question?
Is there a designated or an existing employee that would be special just to train this person? Because if you hire someone without experience, how are they going to go and know what to actually look for?
We will do on-the-job training.
Who?
Katie and myself, we can take them out and Katie will help them with the code enforcement side, what paperwork to file, when to file it, things of that nature. I've been going out with Randy from time to time to help him with commercial inspections. But I need to get Randy to take more training classes, and I would like to eventually see him get certified, at least in the residential code. I hold certification on the commercial side, so.
So we can hire a code enforcement officer that is not already.
Right, and then on the job, train him, get him to certain classes. Yeah, we'll get him up to speed as quick as we can.
Now, you mentioned in this floodplain ordinance that somebody needed to be floodplain certified.
I have attended all the classes that DNR requires to be the floodplain manager for the county. So, I mean, I'm currently that person.
Are there other requirements out there like that we don't hold in Grant County?
Not that I'm aware of right now, Randy.
Okay. Any other questions for Jim? Harvest is over unless the commission is opposed or Jim is opposed. I'd like to set in on the interviews for the code enforcement person. Does anyone have any concerns about that? Or you good with that? Okay. You opposed, Jim? Okay. All right. Anything else?
Well, I may just add one comment. Clayton, I believe you were reviewing or ready to implement the change in fee amounts based on CPI and so forth.
Yeah,
That kind of goes into what Jim was talking about, I think. So.
Yeah, I sent an email to everybody on the commission, or tried to. I resent it last month, I think, or a month and a half ago. And there were kind of options. I mean, there are some things that are difficult. If it was just a $125 fee, it's pretty simple math. Figure out the CPI as of 2016, the CPI as of 2024, July 1st. Do the math. I do math for a living. That's just a multiplication. I usually round it to the nearest $5. Nobody wants to get charged $173.68. You have some things where there's minimums. It's like, oh, it's X per square foot, minimum 25. So I made some judgment calls on what exactly gets applied, and I had multiple columns based on rounding to the nearest, always rounding up or always rounding down to the 5 and to a reasonable benchmark. So if people want to look at the email that I sent, I'm pretty sure I sent it in October. Or I know I at least sent it to Mr. Strauss and Randy. Maybe I didn't send it to the whole commission because I don't know if I had everybody's email. But it can be looked at and we can decide what we want to do. But, yeah.
Any discussion about the fee situation? David, is there a procedure that we need to follow with the fee structure?
If you want to amend the fees, you will have to adopt a fee schedule, then the commissioners would actually have to advertise and then approve that at a public meeting. It would be an ordinance they would approve. But really, it would be an amendment to their existing fee structure ordinance that's already in place.
Okay. Commission members?
Probably ought to review that process just a little bit. In 2016, when this was originally done, Mr. Strange, I think, was our executive director at the time. And I was sitting in the position that you are, Randy, and we had not reviewed our fees, fines, etc., permits, schedules. At that point in time, we hadn't done it for like 15 years. And so we did a complete study of the counties around us, all the adjacent counties, and a couple of others as well that are not necessarily adjacent, to try to come up with, if it's a roof replacement, for example, what are they charging compared to what we're charging, so on. And so anyway, at that point, we brought what our fees were. We may need to adjust, add some new things. It's been a long time. But we brought them up, established our fee structure as we have it now. Okay, and we adopted that as a commission. Action has been taken on that already. That every 5 years or more often, if the commission decided that we would increase the fine and permit fees that we have, we would increase those by the CPI. Whatever the CPI was in 16, if we redid it in 20, the difference, percentage difference in the CPI, and there's several different CPI numbers that you can use. But whatever one that you would settle on, what it was in 16, what it is in 20, that's how much the fees would go up. So that we would be reviewing automatically and you could set the time limit, whatever you want. So our fee structure that we have now, we're operating on, is 2016. And it's been brought before this group before that, hey, it's already been passed that we up this thing.
Well, you've done cleaning.
Yeah, well, and I think in May or June in 24, you brought this up, Dr. Bothwell,
Yes.
and we passed a resolution to say, let's peg it to July 1st, 2024. So the numbers that I have is a reasonable peg to July 1st, 2024 for inflation. So it's really going to be looking for some of the judgment calls on the caps, but there aren't very many, and then just deciding, do we want to round down or round up to the nearest 5, and pick which column we want and pass it.
The point is, Mr. President, is it's already been done, but it wasn't taken care of. We've acted as though we need to do this. Nothing's happened since 2016 when you need to start all of, no, that was already taken care of. The idea of attaching it to the CPI was so that we wouldn't have to do this, every 4 or 5 years or whatever. It would be an automatic adjustment. We'd say, hey, it's time for us to take a look at our fees and up it according to what the CPI is. That has already been passed. And so what we ought to be looking at, Jim, I would come in and be happy to talk with you about it, and Clayton has taken it upon himself to look at it, is we ought to be charging right now what the difference in the CPI was in 16 and what it is now on each one of our permits and each one of our fine schedules.
So we got to get commissioner.
And there
approval.
may be some things then, as we make that adjustment, there may be some other things then that we need to look at, well, maybe this really should have been upped more or shouldn't be that high, whatever. But the point is that we should not, every year, we could be upping it by whatever the CPI is. And what we suggested in July was that we post it, that we do it right now and make it effective January the 1st, so that everybody understands that, hey, these fees are going up. And anybody that is an interested stakeholder out here, they've got 6 months to understand that starting January the 1st, this is the new fee schedule. That's already been done.
But we have to have commissioner's approval, correct? Okay, that's what David's saying. We got to have commissioner's approval before we can implement the new fees.
We had that when we passed.
The commissioners, the three commissioners?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. I mean, it wasn't just this body that.
Okay.
I guess if the language of the table
It had to be
says
done.
that'd be increased.
What we have to do now with the commissioners, we had to do then. We did it.
Okay.
Anyway, bottom line, I don't think there's any disagreement. What we want to do is to get the fee schedules up where they ought to be. Any additional adjustments?
So where do we want to go, folks? Are we ready to have that document that Mr. Schultz put together before us in our next meeting for approval?
I would think so.
Okay.
Now, I might ask Dave, like Dr. Bothell was just saying, the commissioners, I'm assuming that back when we did 2016, the commissioners approved that process of using CPI to automatically adjust it.
That's right.
Would that approval then carry forward to now, or do they need to revisit that?
I don't see why not.
I agree, I just.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to explain. We really don't have to approve anything else unless there's some additional adjustments that we want to make.
Right, there could be some changes that Jim has mentioned tonight, or maybe some things he wants to add or
Yeah,
detract, whatever, but it looks like Dave's kind of thinking about that a little bit, maybe.
that's what ought to be added.
Yeah, I would think, now I'm not familiar with that, whenever ordinance was passed, I would need to read that, but I would think if you change the fees, that the commissioners would need to approve that, even though they said, because who knows what, I mean, CPI, is that from 16 to 17, or are you looking at it from, is it being changed each year, 17 to 18? What's the total change since then? I mean,
That's what we're looking at.
is it the total change from 16 to 24 that you're looking at and raising it that much? And how does the public know what that is? That's one of the ways when you advertise that, they have that hearing to do that. That's one of the ways the notice gets out about it. So again, I haven't seen the ordinance, I haven't researched it just off the top of my head. I believe there would have to be some kind of a process in front of them to get that approved.
Okay, well, let's do that.
Can you
Whatever
research
needs to be done,
Yes.
let's get
that
it done.
for us?
I'll look
And
into it.
Clayton, if you would share with Jim and discuss with Jim how comfortable he is with what you've prepared, and we'll take a peek at it in our December meeting.
Mr. Strauss, if you could find that and just forward it to the rest of the commission. Or you can, yeah, thank
You
you.
want to be part of that?
I want to be a part, yeah.
Okay,
The
so,
one that said.
I've emailed it twice already. Katie can email it.
I'll email it, it's
Okay.
fine.
all right. So Clayton, would you coordinate any discussions with
Yeah.
Dr. Bothwell and Jim?
Yeah.
Do
Okay.
you want me to pull permit fees from counties our size too, so you can kind of compare between a
I think
couple?
if you would do that, that'd be wonderful.
Okay.
Can you include a copy of all of?
Yeah, I'll get everybody in it once I get it all together.
So based on our basic rules and procedures thing that we adopted, this might be time to open for public discussion based on this discussion that's just taken place. So is there anybody in the public that would like to, before we move forward on to the next item 6, anybody else like to have? Yes, Mr. Hartman, do we have a sheet to sign and all that?
It's up there.
I feel that I should probably bring this up. When we're talking about fining people, contractors or homeowners whoever, there's a provision for the appeal process. If someone does not like the decision that the office has made, to get the form from the office, fill it out, and appeal it to the BZA. This would be an example of that situation. The BZA does not overrule the APC in their decisions. That's state code. And it's also state code that they do decide on decisions made by the staff, the APC office, if an appeal is made to them. So it really does fall within the staff to make the decision. And if they get somebody that is upset, doesn't agree with it, they need to tell them, here's your right to fill out this form and get a hearing before the BZA. I think that's the way the procedure is laid out. I think that's the way we gotta go.
Do we have that form?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. President, may I add one more thing based on what Mr. Hartman said? Let's make sure we keep, there's two different issues. One are fees and one are fines. Fines absolutely have to be approved by the commissioners. They have to be advertised. There has to be publication, has to be done at public hearing. Fees is a little bit different, but fines, absolutely. If we modify our fine schedule, it has to be done that way.
Did you address that, Clayton? Fines or do we?
No, this is just fees. Like, I want to build you haven't done anything. Is it fair to say fines are like you're out of compliance in some way or another? The fee schedule was just like, you want to build a roof, you want to add a room, you want to, et cetera.
Permit fees.
Yeah, permit fees, yeah. Yeah, I didn't touch fines. I don't think.
Okay. Anyone else public?
Jim here opened up another can of worms again.
Uh-oh.
There was permits issued. There were no inspections. It was all covered up. And there was an occupancy permit given. The house hadn't been inspected. Now, my wife and I are neighbors, and we've been discussing this time and time again. Now, he says, if I understand right, that if they don't follow the proper inspection procedure, how can you legally give an occupancy permit for something that hasn't been inspected? So what's the issue going to be, or how's it going to be handled, or what happens from stuff that has happened in the past? This board and the BZA have moved and done some stuff without the inspections and different things. I know Mr. Malot's gone. Nicole Bailey's gone. There's several people are gone, but there was a lot of illegal things that happened that didn't get corrected. Now, are they going to be corrected, or is it just a dead horse again? Well, and like he's right, if a building contractor offers inspections, you don't know if the electrical's done right. You don't know if he changed the plumbing. You don't know what he did to the foundation. You don't know what he did to the roof. You don't know what was done outside or inside. But yet, they're issued an occupancy permit without proper procedures being followed. So, I better sign this.
And Randy, as a new director, it's hard for me to say what can be done about something that's happened prior to my tenure here. I'm not sure what the legal ramifications are of that. But I have discussed this with great length with Randy, that, if
Berryhill, the inspector.
Randy Berryhill, if we go out to a place and there are a lot of missed inspections, I don't see how I can put my signature on a piece of paper that says they comply with code.
I think that's being appreciated. Yeah. I don't know, David, do you want to respond to?
I would suggest that anything in the past which would subject the county to liability probably should, well, probably should not be discussed in a public meeting because any representations that are made could be used in court against whoever states them.
So with that being said, we'll make no comment. I think that's what I'm hearing you tell us. Okay.
Correct. That's past. Now, talking about what's going to be done moving forward is a little bit different ballgame, and I think that's what Jim's referring to.
Right.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Jerry.
Andy Ellis from Fairmount, and I'm listening. I didn't know we were going to discuss this today, but from a public perspective, the one thing I would ask, I'm hearing a lot about, increasing fees, penalties. If you're going to do that, which I get, absolutely, there has to be rules that need to be followed, and I understand that completely. But not everybody's building $1 million house.
That's true.
And so it's important that when a person gets a permit, that they are coached and counseled on exactly what the expectation is. Because as a personal landowner in Indiana, it didn't always work that way, or, in this county. And so it's important for the people that are making the rules understand who that they're monitoring and try to help them along. Because a lot of folks don't have a lot of money in order to do a lot of expenditures and hire high-level contractors. And a lot of people do things on their own because that's all they can afford. And I think it's important that we recognize that and we do everything we can to try not to penalize folks that are trying to follow the rules. They need to understand what's going on. And then timely notices need to be sent in a way that's friendly so that they don't feel like they're being picked on. I think we want people to live in Grant County and we want to take care of our community. So I would just ask that when you're doing this, and I'm not saying that people shouldn't pay fees, and if a person doesn't do what they're supposed to do, but I'm just hearing an awful lot of, it sounds more punitive, what's being discussed here, than what it is just trying to go ahead and figure out how do we, manage our area. So that's what I would suggest, and thank you for your time.
Mr. President, just a comment on Mr. Ellis's comments. I appreciate that. And we had discussions in the past, it's been some years ago now when I was on this commission, when we did talk about the tenor of how we handle issues with our public. Make sure it's not being punitive overly when, you can have a tone that sets the conversation in the way it should be. So I appreciate that.
In the 30 years that I worked for the State Fire Marshal's office, I was always one of these people that believed in education over enforcement. If I can explain to you what's wrong with your building and give you some hints on how to correct the situation, I'd rather do that than say, hey, I'm going to hit you with a $250 fine today, tomorrow, the next day, the next day, the next day. Being heavy-handed is not the way to get to compliance. You can talk to folks. I'd rather talk to someone for an hour and say, look, this is what you need to do. Let's work together to get it done. But at some point in time, when you have folks that say, I'm not going to do it and you can't make me, that's when you got to go to the punitive side and say, okay.
You have a club, there's a line when it starts being used.
Exactly.
And this last comment, I 100% agree. I don't like charging people. What I would prefer is that people just call and give us a date. Say, hey, it won't be done by this date. Because when I went last year when I went in, and I looked through all the files that we were behind on. I'll tell you what it looked like. April, we called, no answer. June, Nicole went for an inspection, nothing happened. July, we called, no answer. August, we sent Nicole out in September. We're wasting all kinds of time when we know they're never going to do it, and they're never going to do it. But we're required to follow up. Just give us a call and say, hey, it won't be done until this date, or it's not going to be done, or something. And unfortunately, people don't always respond if there isn't that, like you say, the club down the road. But absolutely, be very sparing.
Well, and we have a lot of I'll scratch that, not a lot, but we have a few contractors that start building without getting a permit. And it happens more than once or twice. And I think Ed and the BZA will get involved is, if it continues, I think we need to look at pulling contractor registrations. They're gonna wanna appeal that because if they don't have a contractor registration, they can't work in Grant County. They wanna appeal that to the BZA. So I think that's something that we may work with down the road, because we want everybody to play on the same playing field.
Is this something that, say, I'm gonna add a room to my house, I come get a permit to it? Is it my responsibility to know how the system works, that I need to know that there's a time limit? You know, there's inspections, there's all this, or is it something that we can hand out a sheet of paper when they get their contract? You know, they come get their building permit, we hand them a sheet of paper that says, okay, you have this timeline, this is what needs to happen?
We do.
I do.
I think we do.
I didn't get one when I had a permit for my room.
You didn't get an orange permit?
I got an orange permit, but it has no rules, regulations, timelines, nothing like that on it.
So there's really not a deadline when your inspections are gonna happen. I know sometimes concrete gets backed up and you can't get it by a certain date because you have all these commercial buildings getting put up. I know sometimes people run out of insulation, drywall takes time, you know, every little bit of construction has its own plate. So I can't really put a deadline on an inspection, but when it takes multiple months and I know that it's getting done, I can see it through the windows, that's where we're getting a little frustrated. So everybody has a list on their orange placard of what inspections are required. We tell everybody when they do get their permit, call for this. You're gonna wanna call around this time for this inspection. You know, we try to make it as easy as possible. We hand out our cards, you know, emails, the whole 9 yards. And when you get to the point that you can see, I know you're putting up drywall, you didn't call for a rough-in, that's where we're getting frustrated.
One more question, when it comes to the fees, you know, like he said, you can build a, $1 million house for 150, but if you want to do something else, 250. Was there a way to add that to like a fraction of percent of what the construction is going to cost? Or, yeah, it just seems like there's a number that's made up for $1 million home, but if you're gonna add something else, it don't add up.
Yeah, the current numbers don't add up.
How did
That's
you
what
come
we're
up
trying to
with the
look
new
at.
numbers?
Oh, I just took the existing numbers and all I've done is adjust for inflation. I didn't do a study and figure out what they should be. I'm not going to say that. I took what they were and I literally just increased it for inflation and rounded to $5.
Which is what you're supposed to do.
Yes.
That was your
Yeah.
choice.
We're not, what Dr. Bothwell was talking about wasn't necessarily making any decisions. It's just like things in 2016 cost different than today. We should at least track inflation. And then like Commissioner Wirt was saying, or Jim was saying, we can also maybe change. I'd be concerned there's too many percentages because then that's a lot of work and there's debate. Well, you say it's worth 1.2, but I say it's 900,000 and that's an X dollar difference and then it's appealed. And so, but yeah, we can certainly be more rational.
Would it be reasonable for us to ask you guys to maybe collect the fee schedules from adjoining counties so that we could do a comparison with the numbers that Clayton's put together just to see if we're in line with our neighbors?
That's what I said I was gonna do.
Okay, that's fine.
Yep, you're good.
Everybody good with that? Okay. All right, any other public discussion in regard to this discussion before we move on to our next item 6? Okay. One other question, Jim, do we seem to be keeping up with the inspections of the permits that we have on record?
Yes.
Okay, that's good news. Okay, moving on to item 6, solar amendment considerations. I'm going to read this again. I think this gives us a little organization as we go into this. We did have a list that was provided. I don't know that we have copies of this now, but these were some solar amendment considerations that we heard the public speak of. So I'm going to reference this list, not that we necessarily have to keep refined to this, but at least it gave us a baseline. Would like to limit the discussion to 3 minutes per person, with each person being limited to 1 presentation. You are asked to come to the podium, state your name and address, and sign the sheet at the podium. we ask that you be respectful and refrain from reference to specific persons. We will not honor speaking from your seat or in the crowd. So those are kind of the, everybody okay with that? Commission members, are we okay with them guidelines? Okay. All right, so, we're in about an hour. Do we need a break before we start this? You guys want to keep going? We good?
Good one to be.
All right, let's do this.
I'll need a break, but not everybody else does, so I'll try to make it quick.
We'll excuse you if you gotta go.
Thank you.
Okay,
Appreciate that.
all right. Solar amendment considerations open to the public.
Jerry Souls, 11240 East, South, Marion. You want to write that address, I want to say this. I believe that the solar ordinance should contain something if there's a change of ownership of who gets ownership of the solar farm leases. I believe that it should possibly state that before any changes in ownership of property used for solar leases, existing owner and new potential owner or owners must notify the Grant County Commissioners and Grant County Area-wide Zoning Board 90 days prior to any changes of any type. This will allow for background checks on potential buyers, giving all contact information on all who are included in said purchase. Potential buyers must also purchase all permits at the cost at that date. The new buyer must also keep in place a bond for decomposing panels and restoring farm ground back to where it's tillable nature again, to where it can be used for farm ground. And I hope you'll consider that. I'd like to see this. I've got some copies if you were interested. It has a-
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. Anyone else?
Jackie Sheets, Matthews. I'd like to talk about the setbacks. The changes I'd like to see, 500 feet from a non-participating residential property line to the solar installation property. Line on one side, 750 feet on the second side, and 1,000 feet on the third side, and no surrounding a property on four sides. I think right now we just have 500 feet wherever. So I think we need to be a little more specific on that. That's all I got.
So what are you saying, Jackie, is there more than one side on there? Is there like around the place, if there's one side 500 feet?
Yeah,
Okay,
if
but
there-
if you got two sides, you want 750 feet on one side, 500 on the other?
And
For all
then,
three
and then if
sides,
there's not a third side, it's gotta be 1,000 feet back.
the whole thing, all the way around. If there's
Yeah, and
around 1,000 feet.
nobody gets surrounded on four sides. So on one side, 500 feet, the second side, 750 feet. On the third side, if they got three sides around them, 1,000 feet. And no fourth. That's crazy. And I know there's areas people are getting stuck right in the middle of all four, being on all four sides, and that's not gonna happen. Please. Any other questions on setback?
Thank you.
My name's Scott Pattison. Live at 725 East in Van Buren Township. I want to start off with a thank you. For the last 3 years, this group of people have spent hundreds of hours researching the effects of industrial solar on prime farm ground and surrounding properties. And we spent a lot of money trying to inform and educate people. So tonight, on behalf of all of us, both the people with the Facebook and rural citizens that are not on that, we want to thank you as APC members and your new leadership and allowing us to express our concerns and making recommendations on this solar ordinance. So thank you for that. We would like to make a recommendation that we have property value protection from industrial solar installations for up to 3 miles. Studies have shown that property within a 300 foot of an installation can lose up to 30% or more of its market value, and this reaches out to a 3-mile radius. If we don't have this, how many millions of dollars are we going to lose in market value on our properties? How many people are going to go underwater on their mortgages by losing that kind of percentage on that? And this is not just like a one-time deal. These are 30-year contracts. This should be protected 30 years out. Because if you lose 30%, it's going to take you a long time to recover that. So if you'd like to fact check us on this, there's a young lady realtor in Madison County that spent 4 years doing this research. And she goes around and gives speeches. Some of you may have heard from her. If you want that, I'll give you that information to fact check us on that. This also affects you in the small towns because these are coming right up to your town limits. So it's not just the people in the rural community, it's also you out in the small towns. So we ask that you accept our recommendation for property value protection and consider maybe not just one payoff, but spread this over 30 years. It takes a long, what's your value going to do? You were talking about inflation. Your property value is going to go up over those 30 years. So you need protection for that. Just a note, it also affects the impact of long-term growth, your cities and your county. The solar companies have what they call a good neighbor plan for these lines. They'll give you a few $1,000s, sign a little thing. I would guess that it probably keeps you from being able to say anything negative about them, or probably being able to take any legal action against them. They'll give you a few $1,000s just to keep your mouth shut. So I would say that's not really a good deal. So thank you. Take that in consideration.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you for this opportunity. I'm Harold King, 707 South Sim Street in Swayze. For 3 years or so in Delaware County and Grant County, I've listened to a lot of solar projects and their presentations. And one of the things they always say is that this farm ground can be returned to its original use. You know, I think it should be too. There should be a decommission plan for any project. I think before any permits are granted, the construction project, the applicant, the owner, the operator must all sign on this decommission plan. It should require the removal of all structures above ground and below ground, if it's going back to the original use. There should be an estimate by 3 contractors that would be willing to undertake this project. And then once you select the medium or one of those contractors, there should be a bond at least 1.5 times more than the estimation. It could be in a bond or other monetary considerations. Because of inflation, as we all know, in the last 4 or 5 years, it went out of sight. That should be reviewed every 5 years and adjusted accordingly. There needs to be a written provision developed by the county legal system in case of a default. Okay, way beyond my pay grade, but the legal counsel should set down a timeline, a penalty for defaults, so that it's spelled out in great detail. I will say that I've heard them talk about notification in case of a change of ownership. Most of these things go through several ownerships in a short period of time, so that's critical. I think it's critical to have this decommission plan, because if not, who's going to take care of it? Landowner, the county, should be the person responsible for installing it. I hope you will include such a plan in this ordinance. I really appreciate you're willing to listen. It's kind of refreshing. Been a while, but I appreciate the time to listen to everyone's concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Harold. Anyone else? Good evening, everybody. I lost my sheet I sign on. Where'd it go? You might have it. It's the first time I've ever been signed in. It's gone.
It all ends with me. I gotta go home.
I like your attitude. I gotta go home too. My name's George Atkins. I live at 1418 South 600 East, zip code ends in 3. Let me get my phone up here. And I'm talking about number 5, and I was a little bit lost at first. I thought, did I come to the right meeting? Because we kind of got out of line from what I had. But anyway, I'm going to read number 5 here. It says the developer must certify that all solar panels were made without using any slave labor during production. Solar panels failing this requirement are to be removed at the developer's expense. U.S. manufactured panels are exempt from this requirement. So I got to looking a little bit on my little iPhone 8 here, not really knowing what I was supposed to do, but I come up with some interesting things. China's advantage in the solar panel production stems from a lower cost in materials, electricity, and labor, what we were just talking about. There's a 44% difference in buying one of those, a panel, I guess, as compared to US, which is obviously more money. In 2017, the PRC, which is the People's Republic of China, since 2017, they have continued to carry out genocide and crimes and able to do this low cost of labor, I would say. For example, child labor, involuntary labor, which I call slaves, etc. China also holds, just jumping around here, about 70 to 80% of the global market in solar panel production. June 21st, 2022, the U.S. passed a Chinese, and I'm going to forget this, I don't know how to say it. I was going to ask Siri and I got busy. It's spelled U-Y-G-H-U-R. I call it the Chinese Labor Prevention Act. From the time that it was passed by us in June of 22, almost the end of the month, by October of 2022, the U.S. had blocked over 1,000 solar panel shipments that were not certified without the use of child labor, which also, remember, includes involuntary and slave labor too, which is, I guess, is still active. And we're just fighting the child labor part of it. But think about those folks that are doing this by slaves. And it appears, and I couldn't pronounce it either, but there is a region in China that, for all practical purposes, the Chinese government, I guess we're going back to the PRC, really has a case of the rear end at these people. I don't know if it's because religious beliefs, what they're up against, but they're really coming down heavy on those folks. So, I don't know, it seems kind of wild and woolly to me that, you know, then, and this doesn't have anything to do with it, but we think about, we sell land to China, U.S. land, but we can't buy any. That's so lopsided. I mean, we can't do anything about it, but it just really pees me off. That's about all I got. I'm going to sign it. I think we ought to throw them back and get our land back. Thank you. Yep, thank you, Joe. Excuse me.
Kenny Cates and Swayze. A lot of our county main tile is over 100 years old. And a lot of wash on top of it. We need to we've got a 75-foot easement on each side. That's a state easement. But we can attorneys tell me, we can write into our rules 150 foot. The reason for this is when we come back in and put a new tile in, we have to move over to get enough depth, enough cover. A lot of dead furries and all that's all gone. Fence rows. And we got a lot more drainage. They're putting in pattern tile and so forth. And when we agree to do something with the solar companies, there has to be an agreement that they'll go for 150 foot on each side. Because these tile won't last. There's a lot of them that's 120 years old. And they're not going to go another 30 years. There's a lot of them breaking down now. And my opinion is it ought to be awarded on main tile. If you say county tile, that eliminates a farmer that goes through 2 or 3 other farmers. And it's it just needs to be done this round so that and it's just like I don't believe they didn't when they put the one at Oak Hill. There's a solar farm out there at Oak Hill. It hasn't operated in 2 years. There's a main tile that goes straight north through the center of it. And if they have to work on it, I don't know how you work on it, because you got solar panels and wire underground and so on and so forth. So you need to get that in advance before you start out. Anybody got any questions?
Would you consider a main tile as an outlet tile, one that others are tied to? Would you consider it an outlet type of tile where others are tiled to it? Well,
county tile, but there's a lot of farmers that goes through his neighbor. Maybe a couple of neighbors.
Right.
And one of them down there towards the head wall has got, goes for solar panel. We've got that over Swayze now.
Sure.
Okay. And there's too many acres that goes through it. And if they build on the thing or whatever, you got 400 or 500 acres that is in trouble if they ever have tile problems, you know. And the solar companies won't come down and dig them by hand. They won't send somebody, so they'll tell you find somebody local, and local people don't want to mess with the wiring and the panels and all that. You know, now's their time to get the thing right. You know, but it ought to be 150 foot on each side of the main tile.
Question about that?
Yeah.
I heard you talk about the main tile, county tile, the outlet tile. Some of these farmers have 8 cubic inch tile that drains a lot. Is that what you're getting at?
Well, it can be anywhere from an 18 to a 30, okay? When you're coming back in now, a lot of these is 22 inch main or 20, old ones are 22 inch tile. They put those in by hand, dug them by hand, and they got a good grade. But there's been so much water over the top, it's washed the silt and stuff off, and they don't have a lot of cover on it.
Make them shallower.
So you got to get out of that swale out to the side, and so you get 3.5 foot of cover.
Thanks, Kenny.
I don't have a pen, I have to go home.
Just leave it there.
I want to talk about Teddos. I want to talk about lighting. I think all lighting should be, must be shielded and directed to the inside of the facility. Has to be, sorry guys, I'm nervous, has to be inside the property. Okay.
What you're asking is all exterior lighting, that it should stay in the property itself without shining out or up?
Yes, sir. My neighbor, about a quarter of a mile from my house, just put in barn dominium. He's got 2 garage doors with 2 lights over the door. Between him and I, there's a fence line, a house, an apple orchard, and my yard with 5 humongous trees. At night, my wife and I can make animal figures on the wall because of his lights. And this is no joke, I'm not kidding you. I've heard 500 feet from a, I'm not staring at you, I'm just nervous. 500 feet from a non-existing property. 500 feet is nothing. 500 feet is 820 feet
farther than this guy's barn.
Excuse me, sir. What was your name and where do you live?
Ted Otis, Grant County, north of town.
Say Chad or Ted?
Ted.
Ted, T-E-D.
Otis?
Yes, sir. O-E-T-E-S-S.
Thank you.
And if any of you think I'm lying to you, you can come to my house. I'll prove it to you.
Katie, is there anything about light being shining on other properties in rural areas?
Yes, there is, but it's kind of hard to enforce since it's a nighttime thing. The only thing I could do is ask them to angle it to where it's not pointing directly at you. Or even put like a little shell around it to kind of help block too.
I'd encourage you to call our office about that because that's unacceptable.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
The only good thing is if I get up in the middle of the night, I don't have to turn on the light.
That's great.
Thanks, Ted. Hey, anyone else?
Yeah. Well, I can speak on two subjects, right? Yeah. Okay. So anyway, Andy Ellis again, out of Fairmount. And last time I spoke about, and I'll reiterate a little bit about, that we need to limit for a given property, a given lease, we need to limit the percentage of what is used within that property. They should not be able to just go ahead and take a whole 400, I'll use 400 acres as an example, and maybe that's the maximum they should be able to lease, and only be able to use a percentage of that inside there, maybe 10% within that. And then we need to put, I believe, I'd ask for you to consider putting distances between these individual farms so that they don't just tether them all together. I mean, they have a tendency, if you look at it, that they'll lease this farm, this farm, this farm, this farm, and tie them all together. And next thing you know, you got a solar sprawl. And so I would recommend it, 3 or 4 miles. I'm not talking feet, I'm talking miles between these actual solar developments. Now, I say developments because for the most part, these are not utilities that are installing these things. These are developers. Their intent is to develop these things and then change hands. They will immediately go to some other developer or an LLC, limited liability corporation. Listen to what that is, limited liability corporation, right? And then you ultimately could end up going to utility. And this is where it gets really concerning because, we're worried about property rights. And this is not a far-fetched example. It's happened in Indiana already. Eminent domain. So next thing you know, you've started 400 here, 400 here, 400 here. You've got 16, another 400. You got 1,600 acres. They're all tied together. And then Duke Energy, as an example, they've already done it. They've used eminent domain in order to be able to go ahead and seize your property. If we let this cat out of the bag and we don't put really strong language in our ordinance in order to protect ourselves, then we won't be able to later. So eminent domain is a real thing. We've all had it in some extent. If they want to come on our property and they want to cut trees because they're getting in the way of electricity, then that's eminent domain. They're allowed to do that. This is something much larger scale. Literally, they could come in and take people's farms from them that have been in their family for generations. So I would ask you to limit the amount of usage within a lease, percentage-wise, and then have a distance between adjoining leases so that we can stop what I would call solar sprawl. So I'm not trying to panic everybody, but eminent domain is a real thing. And if they see something and they want it, they can take it. So.
I just have a quick question.
Yes.
You're speaking my language, Andy, with proper, eminent domain is probably my biggest concern. you feel like if we did those two things, that would, I guess explain to me how that would help against eminent domain. I thought the state would just come in and bully us and bring their guns and do whatever they want.
Okay, well, and if you make yourself attractive to the point where okay, so those are a couple examples. I'm asking you to consider others, but those are two examples where, say you got a 400-acre field and you allow them to develop 40 acres of that field, and they've got a solar installation in those 40 acres. And then you go another 2-3 miles before you have another development. They're not apt to come in there and decide that I want to go ahead. Well, we've got 1,600 acres here or 2,000 acres here. Let's just go ahead and expand it to 4,000. I mean, the substations are already there. The power lines are already there. The infrastructure is already there. So now we can just go ahead and we can just keep piling this thing on.
Yeah, keep it from growing too big so that they don't expand it, is basically.
That's the thing. I mean, because that's what they're going to do. They're going to take a look at where they see that they got a strong foothold, and then the rest of us won't count. I mean, it's just as simple as that. And when you turn it over to the IURC in Indianapolis, then we got a voice, but we don't have control at that point. So I'm asking you to try to put language in it at this time so that we can try to at least control our heritage here and our farmland. I mean, the farmland in this county pays a lot of bills, provides a lot of jobs, and it really is our heritage. So, any other questions?
Any other questions, commission members? Thank you, Andy.
Thank you for your time.
All right, anyone else?
Well, I already signed in once, but maybe I'll put my address here. How about that? 2640 East 1050 South Fairmount, Indiana. Okay, couple things. One is the people we're dealing with, the people that we are trying to protect our citizens from. You got to take a look at what they've done in the past a little bit. In Madison County, Invenergy, also someone who is trying to, that company's trying to develop here. They proposed a solar farm in the northern part of Madison County. And same kind of MO as they did here. Most of it's in secret, happening without people knowing. And they got to the BZA and they got it approved. And then people found out about it more so and got involved and really opposed it. Fought this hard. Took it all the way to the Supreme Court of Indiana and lost. Okay? But during that time, a couple of years went by, and there was a provision that the BZA put in there, a condition of their approval, was it had to be done at the end of December 2022. And they didn't make that deadline. They were coming up against it, and they went back to the BZA figuring it'll be no problem. And they asked for an extension, and the BZA told them no extension. If you can't get it done by the end of the year, don't start. So they didn't start. So then they went to the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission and sued to have them cite the solar farm over the county's objections. At that point, the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission decided not to take up the case. And that's kind of where it is, but it's going on. They've appealed that decision, and word is that they will probably take that, if they lose, they'll take that to the Supreme Court of Indiana again and try and win. So these people don't quit. And another thing you need to know is here's a picture of the solar farm that was proposed in Madison County. I'll pass it around. You'll notice within the gray and orange areas of this, you'll see little small pockets of white. sometimes little squares, sometimes little rectangles. Those are where somebody lives. You'll also see in some of those, there are people completely surrounded. Invenergy said their solar panels would be about 15 foot high. They usually also include a 6-foot fence with barbed wire around the top. You can kind of imagine living in that. You can't see your neighbors. You can go out to the street and go down the road. That house would have a hard time getting sold at whatever price. So you need to think real hard about, okay, we're doing a solar ordinance and we want to protect the people of Grant County. And so we're offering some things that may make it more difficult for them to locate here, but it will help the people that live here, people that have invested in their houses and they want to stay here because they like it here. So in other words, what are we really doing? We are trying to help the people of this county. And you got to wonder about people that want to do that to some people. Also, there's one small area there that's almost completely surrounded. And it's the small town of Dundee, Indiana. Probably a lot of you have never been there, but it is a little bit west of Orestes, Indiana, another small town. So that town, its growth, if it ever had any, or was going to have any, and it might, you never know, they wouldn't have a chance in a situation like that. That would be more like a ghost town, probably. You know. So anyway, what we think is reasonable is we talked about the high impact zone where the APC would decide where solar farms could be located. You know, and then solar companies could try and acquire that land and try and build there. But it would be something that is set aside by the APC, a separate zone, and that would be the area that you would really consider, and you wouldn't consider building it elsewhere. In a little way, solar's kind of a trial anyway. This is not perfected energy system at all. This is really kind of experimental, and these things degrade over their useful life. So anyway, what we also want to think about is prime farmland. Okay, prime farmland. According to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, prime farmland is of major importance in the nation's short and long-term range needs for food and fiber. Because the supply of high-quality farmland is limited, the U.S. Department of Agriculture recognizes that responsible levels of government, as well as individuals, should encourage and facilitate wise use of our nation's prime farmland. Grant County, we have quite a bit of prime farmland. We are very blessed compared to a lot of states in this country. We'll be counted on more in the future to produce. We can't diminish our prime farmland. It's happening way too fast already. The Mammoth Solar Farm, Pulaski and Stark counties, other solar farms, you hear them all over the place, 4,000 acres, 2,000 acres, 1,000 acres. They can gobble up a lot of land in a hurry. Anyway, we have a lot of prime farm ground. We need to protect that. I urge you to consider not only the high impact zone, but an absolute cap of no more than 400 acres for an installation. And of that 400 acres, no more than 10% be allowed to be prime farm ground. That would be roughly 40 acres. Um, There should be an overall cap, something to debate there. But it kind of coincides with what you think is a okay location for a high impact designation. This is just a little list, like the former Dana property, former Active Products property, Malibu, the old Malibu property, Essex Wire, Bragg landfill, former landfill on Central Avenue, Weber's junkyard. Just some possibilities. That's kind of not a list that, you know, I'm really thinking about, but it's just examples of, you know, don't use your good land for this. Use something that can't hardly be used for anything else. 3 miles between installations seems like a minimum, but you'll handle that when you set up the zoning for any possibility of solar in this county, if you adopt the high impact zone, an industrial zone. Does anybody have any questions?
Questions for Mr. Hartman?
Well, I either did a good job explaining it or you don't want to speak up in public, right?
All right, I'll bite it.
Okay, go ahead.
I mean, it seems like that example you gave, of course, is unacceptable and crazy. Seems to me like we could accomplish a lot of these if it goes through the BZA. I mean, it seems like it'd be hard for us. We definitely want to try to think ahead of time, the things we don't want to happen. But if we have something like that has to be approved by the BZA, if things we didn't think of or something slips through the cracks, that could be a check. Because, I mean, it seems to me if there's one farm that has 400 acres and they want to use it and it's a big square and they've got 3 neighbors and they're all okay with it, then yeah, of course. Personally, I'm okay with them using that. And that's different than snaking around and touching 70 people's farms and homes and like that. So, I mean, you think going through the BZA would help something like that?
Yeah, I would propose that you go through the BZA. That's kind of the normal process. And you would be asking for approval of a special exception. When you set up the high impact zone and you add that zone to the zoning table, you would make it an S for special exception.
Okay.
So you go, so the process would be, of course, you would apply. And if the application is looked over and it's complete, then it would go to the BZA for a special exception. And on approval of that, it would go to the Area Plan Commission, which according to state code is the sole approval of all development plans. It would not go on to the commissioners. The commissioner's role is to approve a solar ordinance. That's their legislative role. One of the things that makes draft 4 illegal, even though we have it in this county as law, it's an illegal law, should be struck down by a court if it was challenged, is that it takes the approval process away from the APC and gives it to the commissioners. You would only be a recommending body according to their solar ordinance. So anyway, that needs to be corrected even if nothing else were.
Yeah.
But actually, I'd recommend you correct almost the whole thing. It's very hard to take something like that and fix it. You might just be better off keeping a few lines in the beginning and put a whole new one in that was done right.
Other questions for Ed?
I got one question, and maybe it's redundant, but how would you define prime farm ground?
Oh, there's a map on the USDA. Let me get you that site.
You're talking about an environmental effect from these solar panels, decomposition, but there's 7 to 12 chemicals per year sprayed on farm fields. to go through, so how would that compare environmentally?
I didn't catch your environmental question there.
There's 7 to 12 chemicals sprayed on farm ground in a year. How would that compare to the environmental effect of a solar farm?
Over time? Yeah, well, that's a good question. There have been some studies that say that the land underneath is heated more than if it didn't have a solar panel above it. And over time, that will diminish the fertility of that land. And we're going to talk about 30 years. Now, chemical farming, I mean, there's been some changes made there over the years too, and there may be more in the future.
I read a report last week that says there's roughly 58 more crops that can be spread without the chemicals, in the soil, where the chemicals, fertilizers that we use will no longer be effective.
Yeah. And I am not a farmer, nor do I ever pretend to be one. I'm not even a very good gardener, but I will kind of defer that to my friends. But Randy Atkins, for one, is a farmer. I have heard that, when we adopted a lot of no-till farming practices, we had to use more herbicides to kill the grass and weeds, that we had to increase that. Is that correct?
That would be correct. And farm chemicals are, they've got them dialed in, so to speak, to where it's ineffective financially to put anything more than what you actually need. And there's a lot of research that goes into what that effective rate is. And sprayers are, they're computerized sprayers who are monitoring and calculating all of that. Plus we don't want to damage the crop that we're trying to grow. So there's a lot of research into that. That doesn't mean that, there couldn't be something occur that would create more chemical exposure than what a farmer desires, but we really put a handle on that.
I know the atrazine that you use to kill the corn and the beans at 1 part per billion will make frogs' infertility level drop drastically. So I didn't know if they're like the solar panels, are they made out of a chemical that degrades, that is seeping into the ground over time, or is it decomposition seal in that panel, or?
If the panel's damaged, yeah,
It's very possible
the potential for leaking chemicals from it may be greater. Yeah.
Cadmium's the big one. Cadmium is what you want to look up.
So I do have that site for you. It's prime farmland, Appendix B, from the Grant County Natural Resources Conservation Service or another qualified source stating that no more than 10% of the proposed project is on prime farmland. That would be what they would apply for. It is from the Soil Data Access, SDA, Prime and Other Important Farmlands Report for Grant County. So anyway, USDA, that's where you end up.
We're going to move on. It's getting late. We good? Okay, Mr. Glancy asked.
Kind of, because I wasn't doing amendments, it was something a little slightly different, and I have an answer.
Okay, Mr. Glancy included he requested the adding a document to the packet, so you guys have that. I'm going to ask that we keep this somewhat short. I hate to hear the last guy. You want to get out of here?
I know, I do too. I was just kind of waiting because
I understand. Okay. I was holding you till the end.
Okay, thank you. And I gave Katie a little addendum because there's so much more information coming in all the time. There's a lot of pressure really against the wind and solar. And I'm going wind and solar because the wind's right behind the solar here. And then to answer your question, I retired from Dow AgriSciences. And so when you talk about the chemistries, you're exactly right on the atrazine. When you're talking about the chemistries will break down over time. what is in the solar panels are rare earth minerals, okay? Those minerals will not break down. So that's a really huge difference between that, okay? Does that help?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay.
What rare earth minerals?
Well, that's a good question. Ask the solar companies, because that is part of, like, you would want an MSDS for each one of the solar panels as they come in, so you know what they are. But there's certainly rare earth.
Whoa, we're not gonna do this.
I'm sorry, I fell for it.
Thank you.
But that's another piece. You need to have those MSDSs to know what it is. Okay, all right, I'll try to be a little more animated here. Okay. Thanks for giving me this time to speak.
If you would, Todd, just kind of overview this, and if the commission members have any questions, we'll questions.
I'll roll through it pretty quick. All right. So I'm here to address the urgent need for a strategic pause on the development of large-scale wind and solar projects in our county and across Indiana, a position outlined in the white paper that I recently submitted. We should take a step back and consider whether we are rushing into a future that may not be in the best interest of our communities, our economy, and our environment. The push for renewable energy driven by the federal policies has accelerated at a pace that is just simply too fast. It's leaving us and many other communities unprepared for the consequences. I estimate that there are over 90,000 people across the state of Indiana who are currently fighting these wind and solar projects. These citizens are spending their time and their money on court battles and regulatory challenges, resources that could be better spent elsewhere. The sheer scale of this opposition speaks volumes about the growing public concern over the impact of these projects. But what we are really fighting for, what are we really fighting for? To change our landscape, to cover our fields with solar panels and scatter the wind turbines across the horizon, for a product that comes at a higher cost with less reliability. The reality is that wind and solar energy, despite their promise, still face significant challenges. They are intermittent, dependent on the weather, and require massive investments in infrastructure and energy storage that have yet to be fully developed. And let's be clear, the primary justification for these projects are to reduce CO2 emissions and fight climate change. But there are still serious questions about whether this approach will achieve the intended outcomes. The reduction in emissions are incremental at best. And we cannot ignore the fact that natural climate cycles and other factors play significant roles in global climate patterns. We are certainly not covering our land with solar panels and wind turbines. Are we certain that covering our land with solar panels and wind turbines will actually solve the problem? The science is not settled, and the debate is still going on. Meanwhile, we are seeing rate hikes linked to the cost of integrating wind and solar, even at the small amount that we have currently. For example, NIPSCO's proposed rate increase would burden households with an additional $32 a month. And this is just the beginning. The economic strain is real, and it will disproportionately affect our rural and low-income communities. What I am advocating for is a pause, not an end to renewable energy development. A pause would allow us to assess the technological, economic, and legal challenges more thoroughly. It would give us time to ensure that grid reliability is not compromised, that the cost to consumers are manageable, and that we have a clearer picture of the actual environmental benefits. It's about making sure that we get this right rather than simply rushing forward to meet federal mandates. A pause is not a stop. It's a chance to develop a guiding policy that will help us make informed decisions. I propose that the APC make a motion to adopt a non-binding guiding policy for evaluating future wind and solar projects. This policy would serve as a framework for planning such things as project proposals to include grid impact analysis, a cost benefit assessment for customers, and a waste management plan to ensure projects address energy storage needs and grid updates as a condition for approval, to set clear expectations and for decommissioning and recycling plans to avoid future environmental problems, to provide legal safeguards to reduce the risk of lawsuits by adopting reasonable restrictions that comply with Indiana code. This guiding policy would help protect the county while showing that we are taking reasonable precautions that demonstrates that the APC is committed to responsible development, not as an adversary to renewable energy, but a careful steward of our community's future. By adopting this guiding policy, we can ensure that when we move forward, it is with a plan that truly benefits our communities and preserves our local character now and for future generations. Thank you so much for your time. I know it's late.
Questions for Todd?
Please email me if you have anything.
What you just read, that's a statement in addition to what we had in our packets.
Absolutely. That's just backup information with references. I know I will never get the time to go over that completely, but I am certainly here for questions, emails, give me a call.
Can we get a copy of what you just read? I'd like to.
It will be in the meeting minutes. I have emailed it to.
I'd like to just see that. Yeah, I heard it. I'd like to just actually.
She has the new title. I don't know what
can
it is.
email it to everybody if that's easier
Yeah,
too.
if that's
What the commission
appropriate.
would like?
I can come in.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Anybody opposed to that? Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have 1 minute. I know
Quick,
it's testing,
Michael.
but I want to get out of here too.
Yes.
And I want to go a different direction. 'Cause this is the second governance meeting I've been
Quick.
to today. I just want to remind everybody, tomorrow is election day. You know, I heard nothing in the first meeting I went to today reminding the audience or the viewers. Expend a little bit of shoe leather, go down to your voting precinct or the balloting place that you're guided to, and get out and vote.
Take an umbrella.
Or a poncho.
All right. Or poncho. Okay. Commission members, any discussion?
The meeting minutes for October the 7th, we didn't do those tonight?
No, we don't have those prepared. In our December meeting, Katie and I talked earlier, we will have those, and we will have the minutes from this meeting ready so we can kind of clean up the end of the year.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Commission members, entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
That motion came from who? Mr. Bothwell. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Mr. Courtney, seconds. Anyone opposed? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you for coming, everyone.
What is it? Just pass it around. What do you
Field, I have a question for you before you leave. See these things? The end of the year, so we might have to keep guys. He said you like this so well.
And I tell you, I got some. We don't want to touch the.
All right, how are you?
That we call. Well, which we do, but then we get called to court and we get in trouble. cover because there was nothing